You are listening to Radical Sacred, a podcast centered around spirituality, nature, and connection.
I'm Phil Dickey, pastor, eco-spiritualist, activist, friend of trees, and a small-town Missourian living in the heart of Dallas.
And I'm Jenny Mislin, spiritual director, teacher, seeker, bird watcher, and a homesick Texan living in France.
Join us now as we live the questions, learn from open-hearted conversations, and explore our own deep and sacred roots. How Would You Live Then? By Mary Oliver. What if 100 rose-breasted grosbeaks flew in circles around your head? What if the mockingbird came into the house with you and became your advisor? What if the bees filled your walls with honey and all you needed to do was ask them and they would fill the bowl? What if the brook slid downhill just past your bedroom window so you could listen to its slow prayers as you fell asleep? What if the stars began to shout their names, or to run this way and that way above the clouds? What if you painted a picture of a tree and the leaves began to rustle and a bird cheerfully sang from its painted branches? What if you suddenly saw that the silver of water was brighter than the silver of money? What if you finally saw that sunflowers, turning toward the sun all day and every day, who knows how, but they do it, were more precious and more meaningful than gold? Amen.
We are so excited today, friends. We are here with sisters from Holy Wisdom Monastery, which is an ecumenical Benedictine community of communities located near Madison, Wisconsin. They're centered around prayer, hospitality, justice, and respect for all creation. They are in a peaceful setting, which includes restored prairie, a retreat and guest house, and a green monastery building where all are welcome. Caring for the earth is part of their mission, rooted in Benedictine values of stability and respect for all of creation. I read an article from the New York Times about the sisters this fall, and as soon as I read it, I just thought, oh, we have to talk to them. We have to talk to them. This season is all about reciprocity, and the work that you're doing just really resonates with us, and we are thrilled to have you with us today. We're going to let them introduce themselves because we've got 4 of the sisters with us today. We're super excited. We're going to start off with Lynne Smith. So go ahead, Lynne, tell us about yourself.
Hi, thank you very much, Jenny. Well, as you said, my name is Sister Lynne. I've been at the monastery 25 years. I'm currently serving as the prioress, which is the elected leader. We're an ecumenical monastery, and I'm a United Presbyterian minister. So love being here, working on the prairie, and living the Benedictine life. And I'll turn it over to Mary David.
I'm Mary David, and I've been here for 65 years. So I've watched the little seedling evergreens and trees grow to their mighty tallness and beauty. I'd like to say I've grown that much spiritually, but I can't do that, so I have to wait a while. Anyway, I come from Iowa, where the land is flat and the soil is very fertile, and you raise corn and beans, and trees are a detriment. So coming to Madison, coming to Wisconsin, where there are lots of trees and lots of lakes, was different. And of course, it's a different way of making a living. So I was fortunate enough to see a lot of development for reducing our energy use and for starting a prairie and cleaning out the lake, so forth.
I'm Everline, and I've been in the community for 7 years. I come from Kenya. And actually, since I came here, since I'm still like young, I'm still learning a lot from the sisters, and by listening to their stories on how they came until where they are at the moment.
And my name is Amy Alstad. I am not a sister. I work on staff at Holy Wisdom Monastery, and I serve in the role of Director of Land Management and Environmental Education. I've been here on staff for about 5 years.
I would just love to know. So for our listeners here, what is the heartbeat? I mean, in some ways, we got a little bit in the introduction with Jenny gave, but what is the heartbeat of this space, and what led to, the idea that there needed to be a Holy Wisdom Monastery and that there was going to be a space that was, what was it termed, the greenest building? Where did I read? The greenest building in the country. What is the heartbeat that brought us to this time, this space for Holy Wisdom? And I'll go back to you, Lynne.
I wanted to defer to Mary David first because she was here almost from the beginning, and she could talk about the early history, because our care for the earth has a long, long history.
Great, go for it, Mary David.
Okay. Well, our sisters came here from Sioux City, Iowa, where they were in nursing and had a hospital. And they were invited by the first bishop of the Diocese of Madison to come here. And they built a building in 1954, which is our retreat and guest house now. But it was had in mind to start a high school for girls. So we did that in 1958 by taking freshmen. It was boarding school and day school. Well, there were many things that happened in the 60s, one being Vatican II, the Vietnam War, the women's movement, the sexual revolution. All of those things had a big impact on what we continued to do. And there is still a Catholic school in Madison, Edgewood High School, Edgewood Grade School, Edgewood College, run by the Sinsinawa Dominicans. So after 6 years, and after studying Vatican II, especially the document on the adaptation and renewal of religious life, that we said, I think we need to rethink why starting this school, because we are going to have to do more building and recruit more people. And at that time, we had the Madison Interfaith Dialogue, which was a grouping of Catholic and Protestant and one rabbi, at Rabbi Swarzinski. And they started meeting once a month. And that, again, was the impetus of Vatican II, to open up the doors of the Catholic Church to embrace other religious traditions and dialogue and stuff like that. So they were meeting at our place. And we always invited them to midday prayer and then lunch. And that's how we got to know them. And then we started a retreat center. And then our next movement, we went through that movement of becoming more open to other religious traditions, other Protestants, for instance, Lutherans, Presbyterians, etc. And so we started that route, worked it through our federation of sisters, which regulates canon law. And we started the process of wanting to become non-canonical in order to be open to receive Protestant women such as Lynne Smith. And we had an advisory board, a national advisory board, and we looked at the land with them and said, okay, so we're not putting our emphasis on a school. We're beginning the retreat work and ecumenical work. And we said, what is the biggest asset we have? And is the beauty of the land. And so that's how it started. And we started in 1994 by dredging Lost Lake, which was truly lost in the silt that had run down from the hills where there was, houses being built. So that advisory group, and also working with the state of Wisconsin and Dane County park system, all of those people got together with us, and that's how we started to plan for the restoration of our land.
I think I might ask Amy. I'm sorry, I'm directing this, but Amy could tell you more about, what we've been doing on the land since then.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So we still have, I think the really the beautiful thing and the big picture thing that we always keep in the mind here is that, when you have as part of your mission caring for the earth, you're really never done. There's no finish line, right? At which you accomplish all of your objectives and you say, we did it. Now we get the next project. And so I think the real beauty of what the sisters have dreamed and imagined and created here is that there's this, forever responsibility of stewarding land and being good partners with the health of the land is an ongoing daily, monthly, weekly, yearly, for forever kind of project. And Sister Mary David just gave a really nice overview of the history, sort of how we got there. And my role on staff is to, maintain the ecological, benefits and health of the land, building on all of that history. So we still are working off of an overall land management plan. It's a big, thick, weighty document that's 150 pages long and has tons of detail about how we're doing this ecological restoration work. Goes sort of acre by acre of this acre wants to be prairie, and these are the threats, and these are the opportunities. So these are all of the practices. And that's the plan that I am implementing along with several people on staff. And one of the beautiful things here, and I'm sure we'll get into this, is, the sisters have also imagined a place where the ecological renewal that's happening on the land is tied deeply into the human relationships with the land. So volunteer participation in all of this stewardship work, whether it's working in the garden or harvesting seeds of native species or helping control the non-native invasive species, we're inviting people in, volunteers in, to partner with us in that work and, fostering some really deep and profound relationships in doing so. And I'm happy to talk as much as you want about the specific practices, but I'll pause there for now.
Well, can I ask a clarifying question on, because I love the idea of the relational component with the human aspect of it, but if I heard you correctly, you said this acre wants to be prairie. Is there a relational component to the land itself and a listening that takes place to the land itself in the midst of this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. And, maybe I should defer to the sisters here. Tell us a little bit about the act of listening. What does Benedict have to say about that?
Yeah, the first word of the rule of Benedict is listen. And it's meant to teach us to listen to God and the various voices that God speaks to us through other people, through ourselves. And we can extend that to the land and the surroundings where we are. So the kind of listening, and it is active because it calls for a response. So you listen for a response. So, at the beginning of our land care, I know one of the first steps was to put in a grass waterway, because as the sisters worked with the Department of Natural Resources, this is one way of listening with the land. Water was running off our property over the road, which is just contiguous to us, through the next neighbors and directly into Lake Mendota. so the land is saying, we need some place to, how are we going to handle all this water? And so the first step was to make those grass waterways, and a further step is it wants to be prairie, because the prairie holds water where it lands. And I mean, that's just tying into listening. Thank you, Amy. Yeah. Amy has also a beautiful story. I don't know if we have time, but Amy has a beautiful story about a part of our land that didn't want to be prairie, and we had to listen and figure out what it wanted to be.
Do share.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, and you've already heard the first chapter of this story from Sister Mary David, who shared about restoring Lost Lake. So this is a small glacial lake. We know from historical records that its original size was somewhere between 5 and 6 acres in size. But it was, over the centuries, was slowly getting filled in as topsoil, silt was eroding off of neighboring properties. Big rainstorm would come, the topsoil would erode, it would go downhill, it would end up in the lake basin. And year after year, decade after decade, this lake was literally shrinking. So we were watching it be lost. And the sisters, along with consultation from partners, including Department of Natural Resources and others, decided to take it upon themselves to restore this lake. That involved dredging more than 85,000 cubic yards of silt and sediment that had ended up on the bottom of the lake. This is basically the neighbor's topsoil from 100 years ago that had spent decades sitting in a mucky mess at the bottom of the lake. And it was, so the original size, depth, shoreline of the lake was restored, and all of those cubic yards of silt and sediment that was dug out of the lake was spread on a nearby field. And what did we try to do with that field? We tried to plant prairie. And at this point, we had learned quite a few lessons about planting prairie. We had gotten pretty good at this practice and technique. We knew the right species. We knew when to plant, how to plant, from planting other acres successfully elsewhere on the land. And it turns out that these 3 or 4 acres that were covered with the dredge, the spoils from the lake restoration project, just refused to grow prairie. We never saw those species that were in the seed mix. They never thrived there. And instead, what grew there was the world's most vigorous patch of weeds. Burdock, stinging nettle, parsnips, reed canary grass. These are all species that were super, super happy in these funky soils that had been so disturbed over the years. And so for a little while, we didn't really know what to do. We basically adopted a harm reduction strategy, which was to mow it periodically so that at least the big patch of weeds wasn't like blowing weed seeds into our nice prairies next door. And we just didn't really know, it didn't feel right to try again of like, let's plant prairie again. And so this can be kind of a nudge then into another story that would be great for the sisters to share going net zero. But eventually, it's always been a goal to move towards being 100% powered by renewable energy, fully carbon neutral here at the monastery. And in order to do so, we needed to install about 2 acres of ground-mounted solar. And turns out these dredge spoils, so the same field where we spread the spoils from the lake restoration, tried and failed to plant prairie. It turns out, by listening to the land over the course of decades, the answer there became, this is the land that can get us to fully carbon-free net zero by installing 300 kilowatt hours of solar panels on this field.
Whose idea was it to go net zero? Like, is there a board that makes that decision? Lynn, is that you? Who's making the call to say, hey, let's go net zero?
Well, actually, we have a board made up of lay people and sisters. And when President Biden introduced the energy saving bill that made it possible to get federal grants and loans, and we are not a wealthy community. We have to count our pennies pretty closely. but we said, let's try for it. And so it took us 3 years to do that, to make the other building, our newer building already had, what do you call it, Amy? We added more solar panels to the monastery building, and it also had the furnace. What is it? I can't think of the name.
Geothermal wells.
Yeah, geothermal. Well,
And heat
the other
pumps.
building that was built in '54 did not. So that was an expense to do that in that building, and also to put solar panels on top of it, and put those that we needed to get to net zero, where the land would not grow any flowers. So it was the sisters' decision, with the advice of the board, and to work with the government. And then we held our breath that they would actually pay us, because it was a little iffy there with a new president. So, but we made it and got the money, and that helped us a whole lot. So you can talk about, Lynn, what we have coming up, how we wind up our solar panels and make a sort of a happy party out of it.
Right. The ground-mounted panels are built such that they're hand tilted, and they need to be tilted in the winter at a certain angle to receive the most sun, and then a different angle in the summer. So we decided to invite the community, the larger community around us, to help tilt the solar panels. And we need 90 people to do that. There are 3 handles per these great big panels. And so we made a party out of it. It's extremely fun, and lots of people come out to it. We call it the solar tilt, spring solar tilt. This will be our 3rd year now. And yeah, it's just a big party. We're adding dinner and games after the tilt, and we have a prairie tour during that time. It's a hands-on way for people to be part of doing something that benefits the earth.
I love that. You all are in partnership with a lot of different people. You welcome volunteers. In fact, one of the rules of Benedict that you have listed on your website is all guests who present themselves are to be welcomed as Christ. Will you talk to us about welcoming people as Christ, and not just people, because it sounds like you're welcoming the land back as Christ? Will you talk to us about your welcoming spirit and how that affects people and how it affects the land and all of those things?
Actually, in the rule, Benedict tells us to welcome everybody as Christ. And that is one of the pillar value in the Benedictine spirituality. What we usually do, actually, we welcome everybody. We don't see the race, despite the religion. We welcome anybody, whether you are a Muslim, you are a Hindu, Christian, whether you don't have any religion, we welcome everybody, because Christ did that. And then when I just compare with what is taking place in the land, there are these different types of plants, different kinds of flowers, trees, and all of them are living in harmony with each other. And I think that is really like, it reflects what Benedict was talking about in the rule when he said that you have to welcome everybody as Christ.
We also have that group, as Everline was saying, the Buddhists adopted us because they love silence. We love that they keep silence and they eat meals in silence, and they will have their They're retreats for 7-8 days. So it's always a pleasure to have them around. And they love the prairie, and we've built some platforms so that they can lay there or sit there or read and not be eaten up by bugs or anything like that. So we have truly become an interfaith kind of place. The this last couple weeks, we had a program from the University of Wisconsin on what is it called, Healthy Minds. And that was all on the meditations, teaching people to meditate, etc. And they too were keeping silence at meals. So silence is a wonderful way of being in touch with yourself and with the Holy Spirit and the people around you. And of course, the prairie is not silent all the time, but when you walk the prairie, sometimes it feels like you're walled in with the beauty and so forth. So it has its own silence.
And I think in regards to the land, I mean, Amy can speak to this, but since we've done the restoration, I know that we have some species that have come back, and it's like we've recreated their environment, and so we've noticed that.
Yeah, I can build on that here, and I want to be mindful that this is going to be an audience from a broad geography, so I don't want to get too pigeonholed into the particular species native to southern Wisconsin that we've welcomed back. But Jenny, to your original question of what does it mean to be truly hospitable and how are we welcoming the human and the more than human communities, I think that's definitely part of the foundational factor that has all of us interested in this care for the earth work. Is we think of hospitality as something that has a human audience, but it absolutely has an audience in the natural world too. And when we're putting together our prairie seed mixes, there are plenty of places you can go online to a nursery or get recommendations for a prairie species list, so a plant list that's about 30 species deep. It's maybe 50-50 grasses and wildflowers, and there may only be 30 species in it. But we also know that Wisconsin's pre-settlement landscape, these prairie plant communities had 100, maybe 200 different species of plants present in a prairie. And anytime you miss, so as you're doing a prairie reconstruction or restoration, if you skip any one of those plant species, you miss having all of these, mutual reciprocal relationships that depend on the presence of that plant. And so one thing that comes to mind as an example, we a couple of years ago saw a regal fritillary butterfly on this property. This is a super endangered butterfly. It's only been documented in Dane County, Wisconsin 3 times in the last 20 years. And one of those sightings happened right here. And likely the reason that we saw that butterfly, it's famous for being super, super fussy about the habitat it shows up in. And that is because it's as larvae, so as a caterpillar, it's only going to eat the violets. And so if you skip having a violet in your seed mix, then you might have a butterfly that comes through and is looking for a violet plant to lay its eggs on, and it's not going to find what it needs in that habitat. So I think we're really intentionally restoring the health of the ecology of this land so that all of the many relationships, of course, and so many of those relationships, of course, are sort of invisible to our standard lens and frame as humans. But we're welcoming, truly radical hospitality means welcoming back the people, all the people, and the fritillaries and the Henslow's sparrows and the rusty patched bumblebees and all of the others that have found their way back to this land after we've recreated these plant communities. And I think another, just to take that one step further, I think another thing that happens there in sort of, welcoming all these guests is we're also sort of dispelling the boundaries that we've all been taught to see or understand between, this is the human world and this is the natural world. And those two should really be separate and different. And the natural world does not need our care. It does not need our stewardship. In fact, it might be better off if humans were just absent. And really what the sisters have created here is an environment where people are learning that, that active participatory role of human stewards is so important to a healthy ecology.
And of course, we have been embraced by a lot of people who volunteer. And also part of our Benedictine character is to build communities. And so our Sunday Assembly is an ecumenical community. We have Protestants and Catholics that worship together. And we also have oblate community that's made up of people of different Christian traditions. We have the Friends of Wisdom Prairie, which is a large volunteer community that helps work on the prairie, and that's very beneficial. It keeps Amy alive. And what other community do we have? Well, we have wonderful co-workers who buy into the mission, and that's makes it possible for a small community to do these things. Without friends, without people of different faiths coming to our place, we would not be thriving in offering hospitality.
What it made me think of was, and we've toyed with this notion and concept a little bit, is just the idea of biomimicry. Like, what is it that nature really has been trying to teach us all along, and we haven't always done a good job paying attention to? And hearing you talk about like what, Amy, even like saying like what happens when we leave one of those pieces out, right? Like we miss on a whole ecosystem potentially by just leaving out one little piece. And Lynne, I was reading your homily from Ash Wednesday before we got on here, and one of the things I loved about what you said was talking about Joel and what the prophet was calling us to, and it wasn't calling to war, it was calling to repent. And I wonder, because I want to read what you said here. It said, this kind of thoughtful response can help us in a sense of emergency. We are also being called to come together in community to prepare our hearts in the chaos around us. We see it happening around the world. Ordinary citizens are banding together in solidarity and mutual aid. Just listening to you talk about the prairies and all the work you're doing ecologically makes me want to be more mutual aid and collaborative with both the human and more than human. But in what ways are you trying to model in the way that you run this space, this monastery, a better way of being for us as humans to be in community with one another, but also for the more than human world?
I think there's an old monk that said the first book of life is creation. The second book of life are the scriptures. And I say the scriptures of the world religions, not just the Christian scriptures. And so we also have an emphasis on justice. So last weekend, we were part of the protests in Madison. We have a social justice committee that's very active in our Sunday Assembly. And they published our statement in the State Journal saying we have to deal with Christian nationalism. What does it really mean to take care of your neighbor? What is it? And it's very difficult. And I think people come and walk the prairie because there's harmony, there's community, there's diversity. It's not all one color. And they're not all tall and they're not all short. And so all of the nature helps us to find that equilibrium where all are treated as one. Yes, and we are given good people, wonderful co-workers that can carry that mission on their backs and in their hearts. And so our monastery is very big when you think about all of the people who help us.
Yeah, I think to build on that, one of the keystones of this monastery, because it's always been small, is that we have involved other people in the work of the monastery. So, first of all, it's not the sisters doing all this work. And second of all, when people come here, they're invited to give their gifts. They're invited to participate. It's not a top-down thing. Like, the sisters are going to do all this, and you're invited to come along if you want. But we need these people, and we ask them to give their gifts, and that's part of our being human. To give and receive. Spent these years now, I would say maybe doing the human part of healing this land, and now the land heals us. It's not that it didn't before so much, but it's so much more vibrant, and it's such a rich community that there is, I feel, and I believe others do too, a giving back. It's a mutual relationship, and I think that's a huge part of what we need right now. That's what I was alluding to in my homily, and what I saw happen in Minneapolis and other places. People are getting out and knowing their neighbor as human beings, not as enemies or threats, but human beings who are hurting or who are joyful. And to have places, times when we can do that, come together and remember what it means to be human, which means to be compassionate, to be creative, to be generous. And we see all of that we can see that in the created world as well. I mean, the seeds are just profligate. The plants are profligate with their seeds. They feed rodents, they feed birds, they feed, well, in some cases, humans. And there are millions of seeds from the prairie. And then the people who eat the seeds, or the beings that eat the seeds, they leave their droppings, and maybe they plant the seed somewhere else. And so there's this vital circular giving and receiving of gifts that we see in the prairie, and that can so much benefit us as human beings in community if we remember that that's what really gives us life, not just holding up and protecting ourselves, but being a giving and open receiving community with one another and people different from us.
That is so beautifully said. And one more piece that I think belongs here in this part of this conversation, I'm thinking back, Phil, to your question, how is this place, how is the sisters community modeling a more mutually beneficial way to be in relationship with the world? And part of that dials back to, Benedictines are famous for being a very stable monastic tradition. Stability is one of the core values. So much so that early Benedictine monastics earned this nickname of being lovers of place. So rather, some of the other monastic traditions would do pilgrimages and peregrinations, and they'd be wandering about, whereas Benedictines set down roots, metaphorical roots. And here, this sisters community has put down both metaphorical and very literal roots, right? Planting hundreds of acres of prairie with these perennial, deep, amazing root systems. And so I think, that in and of itself is a real, it's a real model. And I see people coming to this place and being inspired by that model of, I'm going to pick a place and I'm going to be very present to that place and very attentive to that place And this mutually beneficial reciprocal relationship can bloom with that commitment. And that, also ties back on that biomimicry of, there are so many models of lives in the natural world where, like we're built to belong to a local ecology. And I think one of the, there's so much coming at us in this moment, globally, and there's, stuff from across the world in our news feeds and in our ears and in our hearts. And, kind of like right sizing our geographic presence in the world can be part of the answer of, what does that relationship look like and where are we struggling?
Another event that has helped us is when we were in between, we had a larger building we were going to take down. When we built this building, we had room there. So we had invited some of the missionary Benedictines from Korea, the women who didn't have an opportunity to study English as a second language. So we invited them to live with us. And so we had sisters from Korea, from Africa, from Brazil that actually lived with us. We took them to town, or got them on the bus to go to town to study English as a second language. And they lived with us for a year. I think we went through about 30 of those sisters from different countries who did not have opportunities as women. And we are strong on helping women gather their right place beside the men. And so that was helpful. And then when we had an empty house, we had Jewish social services who called us up, and they were sponsoring a boat family from Vietnam. And their housing fell through. Would we take them until they could find their adequate housing again? So we did. So we had Leek and Mai and a little girl, 3 years old, and they stayed with us and lived with us. And we also had a woman from India whose sister had a job in housekeeping, and her sister in India, husband died, and she had 2 little girls. So she asked if we'd help sponsor them. And we did, and they lived with us for 5 years. And our dear sister Joanne, who died in December, she was 95, they would call her grandma. And so we have justice from actually sharing our house and our hearts. And they did more for us than we did for them. We learned to appreciate different kinds of food. We learned to appreciate the way of being and so forth. I can't tell you how rich an experience that was for the community and for the people who came here, because they all loved the Korean sisters and they loved the couple from China and all so forth. Yeah, so it's important to do both the prairie and the people's prairie and serve. And because we could do that, we benefit, not them as much as we benefit.
Oh, that's beautiful, y'all. All of that was beautiful. Would you mind each of you maybe taking a moment and telling us about just a specific place this week or this month that you are finding joy and delight in the land around you and the animals around you? What specifically right now is bringing you joy in your surroundings?
For me, it's watching the turkeys who are about to, I get a real charge out of them, because when it becomes mating season, everybody is in bloom. And also the deer will start having their little babies soon. And it's always nice to see those. And to hear the birds. I mean, the birds come back, and then we had 9 inches of snow. And I say, oh, where those little birds go? We had 9 inches of snow. But when they came back during that 1 day or 2 days when it was like 70, and the place was just chirping, but then the snow came. And I don't know how they survive, but I guess they do because they're chirping again. So spring is just a glorious time on the prairie and in the woods.
And for me right now, the lake is a special place because we have a lot of migratory birds that come through here. So it's fun to go out each day and see who's on the lake. I went for a walk last night and there was, I don't know what was going on with the mallards, but there was whatever you call ducks do, quacking, 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 and then several would take off and fly around in a circle and then come down and land, and some more would take off, and it was a joyous sight.
Usually in the beginning of winter, when everything is quiet, when all the birds have gone, I feel so lonely. But recently when the birds came back, I feel like everybody's back, and I feel really like, so I usually like walking just across the woods, just listening to the birds, because I feel I'm not alone.
So many great symbols of spring already mentioned here. I think what I will chime in with is, and this has been such delight to me just this week, so we're recording the first week in April. Nothing is yet leafed out, so we still have a lot of bare twigs and branches, unless you look really closely. And then if you really pause and pay close attention, the buds that will soon burst open and become the flowers and leaves of springtime are present and are just waiting, just biding their time. And one thing that gives me such delight every year, and somehow I forget this every single spring, and it surprises me and delights me anew every year, is those buds are not green. These leaves don't yet have their chlorophyll that they'll have all summer long. And so it's almost as if it's a fall color palette. If you look really closely right now, the marsh betony, the wood betony, the mountain mint, these are like magenta buds that are just on the cusp of popping open. And somehow that juxtaposition of like spring should be green, right? Like we get those warmer colors. That's the fall color palette. And every spring when I'm like, oh no, it's also the spring color palette. It's just a real wonder to me.
You mentioned a couple times this idea of retreat and that people come and have retreats. I would love to know what a retreat looks like on the premise and property. And you mentioned even having some places to prevent from being taken away by bugs, because I hear the bugs in Madison can carry you away if you're not careful. So I would love to know what retreat looks like if you visit. And then also just what does retreat mean to you in this season as we approach spring?
Well, a personal retreat can look like almost anything. That can be designed by whoever is coming on retreat. And it might be that they spend time walking outside. It may be a quiet time inside by themselves. It could be reading in the library. It could be using the meditation trails and meditating. Certainly catching up on sleep. We have a wonderful chef who uses vegetables from our vegetable garden when that's going. And so good meals, good nourishing meals are also a really good part of a retreat. And I maybe just have Amy talk a little bit about the fact we have some seasonal retreats that are really designed around the land that Amy and our Director of Spiritual Nourishment do.
Yeah, that has been a really fun experience for me personally. It was a real growth edge, I would say, for me, with my background in conservation biology and restoration. You can bet I had never led a retreat before. And now all of a sudden here I am co-leading an eco-spirituality retreat with a dear coworker who brings the lens of the theology and the spirituality, and we get to merge that with my ecology and make a retreat that's very much at the sweet spot of the eco-spirituality that flourishes here at Holy Wisdom Monastery. We make sure to build in sort of the Benedictine rhythms of work, prayer, rest, and study. So there are different opportunities for dialogue, for quiet time, for reflection. And that's just been a real privilege, a new and surprising role for me. And it's been such a privilege and an honor, really, to witness people. So we bring people in. There's no commuter option. We like to say everybody is staying overnight in our retreat and guest house on site at Holy Wisdom Monastery. And, these people have never met one another. Oftentimes they don't have a lot in common, but they build such a supportive and beautiful community just in a short amount of time. And so it's really, really neat to see them get vulnerable with one another and to open themselves up to, the teachings of the land, to the teachings of the group, and just kind of watching people honor that human need that we all have to pause every once in a while and rest and sort of take stock and reflect on our own lives. And to do that in this setting where the land is a partner, the land is a teacher, as well as the fellow people in community on this retreat. It's just been really fun and neat to see the effects that this place has to people who come visit on retreat.
What are your hopes for Holy Wisdom and for the people that come through as we are winding our time down together today? What are your deepest hopes for the land, for the people's lives you touch, for your community?
Well, of course, one of our hopes is to grow our own ecumenical monastic community. And we think there is a turn in the road that there are more women interested. In fact, after we had that New York Times article, we had a number of women who called or who wrote and wanted to know more about joining the community, who were 70, who were 65, who were 55. And also we had some that were 19 and 20. And so we're working with about 4 people now that come regularly, and when we talk about many things and seeing where their life will take them. Also, and this is not so much our work as the fact that people recognize that, setting aside gorgeous land that we have that overlooks the city of Madison and Lake Mendota. We're not on the lakeside, but we're up on the hill, not far from the lake. And anyway, because of what we have done with the land and the lake, we got our name submitted to, Amy, what's the name of that organization, Science and that gave us the Assisi Award that meets once a year. It's the Departments of Science.
I believe it's the Society for Conservation Biology.
Yes, that's it. And so somebody submitted our name, and we got chosen to receive the first reward for religious purposes because of what we did with the land. And so we had to go to Cartagena to receive that award. And this was the first time they did a religious award. They are not religious in any other sense other than they care for science and land and water and all of that. But because when the scientists go to, say, visit the indigenous populations of a country, they often are looking just for the facts. They'll help their science and improve all of that. And they fail to look at what is the religious dimension that makes them keep the Native Americans, whatever the group of people, why they do care for the land the way they do. So they decided to give an award to a religious group that does that kind of thing. So they chose us to, and there was a Franciscan monk there from, he was working in Kenya. And he said, I'm a Franciscan. He said, we've planted 1,000 trees in Kenya. And he said, I should have got that. And we said, yeah, we believe that you should have gotten that. But anyway, so, that recognition that the religious part of a human being, is very important in caring for the land. And the scientists recognize that instead of just running ropshod over that religious impulse in each of those people, is not to gather the wealth that is there for them. Yes, they can get their scientific measurements and whatever else they do, but they need to bring the two together. And so that was the effort of this national group, to begin that, to recognize that. And somebody knew, she was a professor at Marquette University, knew of our work, and she sent our name in, and we got invited, and oh Lord, there we were, this small little community. But we went there and watched out of our hotel room, looked out on the sea, and saw the people taking their nets around and pulling their nets in and pulling the fish in and throwing out the ones and the seagulls that came to eat those, and saw that right in front of our eyes. So, God works, the Spirit works in different ways where you least expect. Yeah. So, just a little story.
So we're recording on Monday, Thursday, but this will come out just after Easter. But I wonder if any of you have just a Benedictine or just in general an Eastertide blessing or just thought that you want to share with our listeners as well.
I think our prioress does.
Well, to tie it to the land, I mean, in the Northern Hemisphere, Easter is in spring, and we certainly see the new life that comes forth every year here in the prairie. And at times, it's hard to think about new life. I think in our world today, maybe we have a lot of violence and injustice happening. But I would offer the word of hope that can come from creation, and it's springing forth again. Life can come forth again where there has been death and destruction. And we believe in a God that keeps creating, and we see that in the land, and that's what we celebrate at this Easter time.
Where can folks find you, find out more information about Holy Wisdom, and what do you have coming up that you would like for people to know about?
Well, I'd say the best place to find out about us is on our website. It's holywisdommonastery.org. Lots of information there. And if people want to, we're also on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. We live stream our Sunday worship, and we podcast midday prayer Tuesday through Friday. People can find the link to that on our website or follow us on Facebook as well. One of the things we have coming up that has to do with the land, it's for women, single women between 18 and 45. We have a week in July called Summer Stewards. So it's a collaboration between the land management department and the sisters. And so the women work on the land a little each day in different areas. And then we teach Benedictine spirituality the women come to prayer and meals with the sisters. And we do sharing around spiritual values and also the value and the spirituality of caring for the earth. So there's information on our website about that, or they can email me, lwsmith@holywisdommonastery.org. Lots of retreats and things coming up too. And if anybody's in Madison hearing this, we have prairie walks that come up seasonally, and the land is open for people to walk on the trails.
I just saw the deep breath self-guided retreats, and so you might have to be careful. You might see me before too long. It looks wonderful.
We also, Phil, we also have, I don't know if you fit this category, but a Center for Clergy Renewal with 2 immersions a year in each cohort. So there may be clergy out there who are looking for some renewal, spiritual renewal. It's been a very meaningful program for people to come together, form community with their cohort, and they've stayed in touch even after the experience here.
Well, I do hope that people will go check out the website. There are lots of beautiful things. And again, if you're in Madison, go check out Holy Wisdom Monastery. All of you, thank you so much for your time today and for your willingness to join us. What a gift to just hear about the beautiful work that you're doing. So our deepest gratitude to each and every one of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the Radical Sacred community.
In these uncertain times, may you cling to hope and deep connection, and may you work towards living in the spirit of reciprocity with all beings.
Our lovely intro and outro music is Beach Song by the band Sarin.
And it's just the 2 of us here at Radical Sacred, so please help us out by sharing with your friends, rating and reviewing us. Find more of our work on Substack and Instagram.
Remember, you are on sacred ground. Stay rooted.